They say you can't truly know someone until they've shown you their worst. I thought I knew Sarah, my wife of 12 years. She wasn't perfect. None of us are. But she had this way of turning the mundane into something magical. Her laugh could fill a room, and her plans, though often ridiculous, were always ambitious. But there's a thin line between ambition and recklessness, and I was about to learn just how far Sarah was willing to cross it. It started with the debt. I had no idea about it at first. She didn't say a word, and frankly, I didn't think to ask. We shared a roof, a son, and a life, but not everything, apparently. Not our financial troubles. I was the steady one, always calculating expenses, tucking away savings when I could, ensuring there was enough for Noah's school fees and our daily needs. Sarah, on the other hand, believed in living in the moment. And that's what she did. Now, I'm not here to paint Sarah as a villain. At least, not entirely. She had her dreams, and I respected them. But when her dreams started to require $20,000 that we didn't have, I'd have expected her to, at the very least, loop me in. She didn't. Instead, she went behind my back, took out a loan, and handed me a financial bomb with the timer set to explode in my lap. The day she left, it all came crashing down. I woke up to find her gone, along with her suitcase and my peace of mind. Noah was still asleep, blissfully unaware of the chaos waiting to greet me. I found the note on the kitchen table, scrawled in her loopy handwriting. I need to follow my heart. Handle the debt, Jacob. It's yours now. At first, I laughed. I don't know why. Maybe it was the absurdity of it all. Follow her heart? Was her heart on a yacht somewhere, sipping margaritas? Because mine was trying to figure out how I'd pay off a loan I didn't even know existed. And then there was Noah. How do you explain to your 10-year-old son that his mother has abandoned the family? You don't, not at first. You tell yourself that you'll shield him from the mess for as long as you can. But Noah isn't just any kid. He's sharp. Too sharp. I've always been proud of his intelligence, but in moments like these, I almost wish he weren't so perceptive. The house felt emptier without Sarah, not just physically, but emotionally. She had this way of filling spaces, even when she wasn't trying. Now, every corner seemed to echo with her absence. I stood in the kitchen, staring at her note, wondering where it all went wrong. Was it the fights? The arguments about money? The late nights I spent working while she planned trips we could never afford? Maybe it was all of it. Or maybe it was none of it. Maybe this was just who she was, and I was the fool for not seeing it sooner. But then, there was Noah. My anchor. My reminder that, no matter how much of a mess Sarah left behind, I still had a reason to keep going. He was my priority now. Not the debt. Not the betrayal. Just him. And so, I folded Sarah's note, placed it in my pocket, and made a silent vow. I wouldn't let her actions define the life we'd build moving forward. Of course, that was easier said than done. The cracks she left in our foundation were already starting to spread. I hadn't even begun to figure out the extent of the damage, and yet, the weight of it was already pressing down on me. Still, I clung to the one thing Sarah couldn't take from me, my resolve. Looking back now, I wonder if Sarah ever really understood what she was leaving behind. Not just me, but Noah, too. Did she think we'd be fine without her? Did she care? Maybe I'll never know. But as I stood in that kitchen, staring out the window at a future I couldn't yet see, one thing was clear. She'd made her choice. And now, I had to make mine. They say betrayal hits hardest when it's unexpected, but I can't say I didn't see the cracks forming. The problem is, even when you see them, you don't believe they'll break. Not until they do. And when Sarah left, it wasn't just my heart that broke. It was my sense of stability, my trust, and frankly, my pride. The first day after Sarah's departure, I found myself pacing the living room like a caged animal. Every step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the questions I couldn't answer. Why hadn't she told me about the loan? How could she leave Noah behind? And, God help me, why did she think this new boyfriend of hers was worth $20,000 of debt and the destruction of our family? Noah found me staring blankly at the wall that morning. "Dad, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with more concern than any 10-year-old should ever have to feel. I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him that everything was fine, that his mom would be back soon, and that we'd all laugh about this one day. But Noah isn't a kid you can lie to. He has this way of looking at you, like he's peeling back the layers of your words to see the truth you're hiding. So, instead of lying, I gave him the watered-down version. Your mom needed some time away, I said, forcing a smile. She's dealing with a lot right now. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he was going to call me out. But instead, he nodded slowly, like he was filing the information away for later. Okay, he said, but if you need help, just tell me. I can handle it. That one sentence hit me harder than Sarah's note ever could. He's 10 years old. He should be worrying about homework and soccer practice, not whether his dad can keep it together. And yet, there he was, offering me support like he was the adult and I was the one who needed looking after. As the hours dragged on, the weight of Sarah's absence grew heavier. I couldn't shake the image of her packing her bags, slipping out the door, and driving off to God knows where with some man I didn't even know. I tried to distract myself, cleaning the house, organizing bills, anything to keep my mind occupied, but nothing worked. Everywhere I turned, there was a reminder of her. The coffee cup she left on the counter, the perfume lingering on her scarf, the half-finished book on the nightstand. By evening, I was running on fumes. I sat at the dining table, staring at the pile of unopened mail, when Noah came in with a plate of peanut butter sandwiches. You didn't eat lunch, he said, sliding the plate toward me. I stared at him, my chest tightening. Thanks, buddy, I muttered, taking a bite more out of obligation than hunger. Noah watched me for a moment, then asked the question I'd been dreading all day. Is Mom coming back? I froze. How do you answer a question like that? Do you sugarcoat it? Do you give false hope? Or do you tell the brutal, unvarnished truth? I don't know, I said finally. But no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. I promise. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, as if deciding to believe me. Okay, he said simply. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I believed myself. How were we supposed to be okay with $20,000 of debt hanging over us and no plan to pay it off? How was I supposed to shield Noah from the fallout of Sarah's choices when I couldn't even shield myself? That night, after Noah went to bed, I sat in the darkened living room, running my hands through my hair and trying to come up with a plan. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of unanswered questions and impossible choices. But even as the weight of it all threatened to pull me under, I kept coming back to one thought. Noah. He was my anchor, the one thing keeping me grounded. I couldn't let him see me falter, couldn't let him feel like his world was crumbling around him. And so, I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and told myself that we'd figure it out, one step at a time. Because no matter how much Sarah's betrayal had shaken me, I couldn't let it break me. Not for my sake, but for his. You'd think finding out your wife ran off with another man would be enough of a gut punch, but Sarah had a way of making sure her betrayal had layers. The note she left behind wasn't just a declaration of her newfound freedom. It was a financial time bomb. And like an idiot, I'd been too numb to see it ticking. It was the day after she left when the first crack in her plan appeared. A letter arrived in the mail with bold red text across the top, final notice. I opened it, expecting a routine bill, but instead, I was staring at a demand for payment on a $20,000 loan. Her name was at the top of the letter, but the fine print was clear. Our address was listed as the guarantor, and failure to pay would impact both of us. I read the letter twice, maybe 3 times, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. They didn't. The debt was real, and it was now my problem. I could feel the anger bubbling up, not just at Sarah but at myself. How had I missed this? When had she even taken out the loan? I sat there at the kitchen table, my head in my hands, trying to piece it all together. Noah walked in, his face lighting up when he saw me. Hey, Dad. I found this article about robotics I want to show you later. You'll love it. His enthusiasm was infectious, but I could barely muster a smile. I was too consumed by the thought of how I was going to protect him from the fallout of Sarah's mess. Sure, buddy, I said, shoving the letter into the pile of mail on the counter. We'll check it out later. But later never came. Instead, I spent the evening digging through Sarah's things, searching for any clue about the loan. Her desk drawers were a mess of receipts and unopened envelopes, and I found nothing but frustration. Every dead end felt like another twist of the knife, a reminder that she blindsided me completely. It wasn't until I logged into our shared banking app that the full scope of her betrayal hit me. The savings account, the one we'd been building for years to secure Noah's future, was almost empty. A quick scroll through the transaction history revealed the culprit. Sarah had drained nearly all of it in the weeks leading up to her departure. Thousands of dollars, gone, with no explanation or justification. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. That money wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was supposed to be Noah's safety net, his college fund, our cushion against life's uncertainties. And she'd stolen it without a second thought. Noah must have heard the noise because he appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed with concern. "Dad, is everything okay?" I forced a smile, though it felt like my face might crack under the effort. "Yeah, buddy. Just some adult stuff. Nothing you need to worry about." But Noah didn't buy it. He never does. He walked over to the table, his gaze falling on the stack of mail. "Is this about Mom?" he asked, his voice steady but soft. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to shield him from the truth, to keep pretending that everything was fine. But another part of me knew that Noah wasn't a kid you could lie to. Not convincingly, anyway. So, I sighed and gave him a version of the truth. "She left us with some problems," I said carefully. "Financial problems." Noah's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he looked far older than his 10 years. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough," I admitted. "But I'll figure it out. I always do." He nodded slowly, then pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "Maybe I can help." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. What could a 10-year-old possibly do to solve a $20,000 problem? But the way he looked at me, calm, determined, like he'd already made up his mind, stopped me short. "Thanks, Noah," I said, ruffling his hair. "But this is something I have to handle." He didn't argue, but there was something in his expression that made me uneasy. It was a look I'd seen before. The look he got when he was working on a project and wouldn't stop until he cracked the code. I should have known then that he was already plotting something, but I was too distracted by my own panic to notice. That night, after Noah went to bed, I stared at the loan notice again, my mind racing with questions. How had Sarah gotten approved for such a large amount? And why had she needed it in the first place? The answers felt just out of reach, taunting me like shadows in the dark. And then there was the matter of the savings account. If she'd drained it all, where had the money gone? Was it sitting in some offshore account, funding her new life with David? Or had she spent it already, leaving nothing but a trail of receipts and broken promises? I didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. Sarah had left me with a mess I couldn't ignore. And as much as I wanted to wallow in anger and self-pity, I knew I didn't have that luxury, not with Noah depending on me. So, I did what I always do. I took a deep breath, rolled up my sleeves, and prepared to face the storm head-on. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't outrun your problems. You can only face them one step at a time. You'd think that after discovering the $20,000 debt and the empty savings account, I'd hit rock bottom. But no. Rock bottom has a way of showing up when you least expect it, just to remind you how much farther you can fall. The next few days were a blur of bills, emails, and unanswered calls. I was trying to piece together a plan. Anything to stop this financial avalanche before it buried us. But every time I thought I was making progress, a new obstacle smacked me in the face. First, it was the realization that Sarah had used our address as collateral for the loan. Then, it was the demand letter threatening legal action if payments weren't made immediately. What made it worse was the suffocating silence. Sarah wasn't responding to my calls, texts, or emails. It was like she disappeared into thin air, leaving me to pick up the pieces of the mess she'd made. I couldn't even yell at her, couldn't demand answers. All I had was her note, crumpled in my pocket like a mocking reminder of how easily she'd walked away. And then there was Noah, my son, my anchor, my source of both strength and guilt. He didn't know the full extent of what was happening, but he knew enough to worry. I could see it in the way he watched me, his brows furrowed as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. And every time he said, "It's okay, Dad. We'll figure it out," I felt like a failure for not having a plan already. The turning point came one evening when I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the numbers in front of me. The math didn't lie. I couldn't make the payments on the loan and keep up with our other expenses. Something would have to give, and I couldn't let it be Noah. He needed stability, a roof over his head, food on the table, the sense that his world wasn't completely falling apart. But how could I give him that when everything else was crumbling? "Dad?" His voice broke through my spiral of thoughts. I looked up to see him standing in the doorway, his expression calm but serious. "Are we going to be okay?" I hesitated. The truth felt too heavy, but I couldn't bring myself to lie. "I don't know, buddy," I admitted, "but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we are." He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. Then he walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's okay. I've got an idea." I blinked at him. "An idea?" "Noah, this isn't something you can solve with an idea. It's $20,000, not a school project. Just trust me," he said, his tone confident in a way that both impressed and unnerved me. "You don't have to do this alone." I wanted to dismiss him, to tell him that this was an adult problem and he didn't need to worry about it. But something in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't just determination. It was understanding. He wasn't just trying to help. He truly believed he could. "So," I nodded. "Okay, buddy. What's your idea?" He grinned, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. "You'll see," he said cryptically before heading off to his room. The next morning, I found him hunched over his tablet, his fingers flying across the screen. When I asked what he was doing, he simply replied, "Research." And when I pressed for details, he grinned and said, "You'll find out soon enough." At first, I thought it was a distraction, a way for him to feel like he was contributing. But as the days passed, I realized he was up to something. He'd ask me random questions about Sarah, her habits, and her favorite places. He even asked if I still had access to her email account, which I did, though I hadn't thought to use it. "Why do you want to know all this?" I asked one evening. "Just trust me," he said again, his eyes sparkling with that same quiet confidence. "I've got this." I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me wanted to push for answers, to demand he tell me what he was planning. But another part of me, a part one didn't quite understand, felt compelled to let him take the lead. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was the realization that he was smarter than I often gave him credit for. Whatever it was, it kept me from interfering. And as I watched him work, a strange sense of calm began to settle over me. For the first time since Sarah had left, I felt like we might actually come out of this okay. I didn't know how or when, but I believed in Noah. Looking back, that was the moment everything began to change. It wasn't just about the debt or Sarah's betrayal anymore. It was about us, me and Noah, proving that no matter how much she tried to tear us apart, we were stronger than she thought. And I'd soon learn that when Noah said, "I've got this," he meant it in ways I never could have imagined. When Noah said, "I've got this," I thought it was just his way of reassuring me, like a kid trying to lift a weight far too heavy for their little arms. But I was wrong, very, very wrong. Noah wasn't just offering empty words. He was orchestrating something far bigger than I could have imagined. It started with small, seemingly innocent questions. "Dad, do you remember when Mom got her new phone? Or did she ever tell you what app she liked to use?" At first, I thought he was just curious, maybe trying to process her absence in his own way. But as the days went by, his questions became more pointed. "Do you think Mom would have used the GPS app we all downloaded for our hike?" he asked one evening, his tone casual, like he was talking about homework. That made me pause. The GPS app. Of course. We'd installed it on all our devices after a family hike last year, when Noah pretended to get lost so we'd buy him a kid's smartphone. At the time, I'd laughed at his cleverness. Now, I wondered if that same cleverness was working overtime. "Noah, are you using that app to track your mom?" I asked, half joking. He looked up from his tablet, his face the picture of innocence. "Wouldn't you want to know where she is if you could?" I stared at him, half impressed and half horrified. "You can't just spy on people, Noah." "Why not? She left us, he shot back. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with a determination I'd never seen before. She left you with her debt. She left me without a mom. And she's out there, pretending like we don't exist. That's not fair. Fair. He was right. None of this was fair. But what could I say? What could I do? Noah's logic was cold, sharp, and impossible to argue with. And the worst part? He wasn't wrong. Okay, I said finally. What did you find? He grinned, the kind of grin that made me realize just how much like Sarah he could be when he set his mind to something. I know where she is, he said simply. I blinked. You what? I know where she is, he repeated. She's staying at that fancy lodge by the lake. The one we drove past last summer. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My 10-year-old son had done in 3 days what I hadn't even considered doing. Noah, I said, my voice tinged with disbelief. How do you even know this? He shrugged, like it was no big deal. The GPS app. It shows her phone's location in real time. She's been at the lodge all week. And you didn't think to tell me sooner? I asked, my voice rising. I wanted to make sure I had everything, he said matter-of-factly. Her boyfriend's there too, by the way. His name is David. He works at her old office. And guess what? Mom used some of the loan money to pay for the trip. My head was spinning. It felt like I was trapped in a bad soap opera, except the script was being written by a 10-year-old genius with a vendetta. How do you even know his name? I managed to ask. I called her office while you were at work, he admitted. I said I was her son and asked if she was on vacation. One of the secretaries told me everything. People really like to talk if you sound sad enough. I didn't know whether to be proud or terrified. My son was 10 years old and already outmaneuvering grown adults. Noah, I said, rubbing my temples, you can't just do things like this. Why not? He asked, his voice calm but firm. She betrayed us, Dad. She left us with her mess. I'm just fixing it. He said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe, to him, it was. But to me, it was a wake-up call. This wasn't just about the debt or Sarah's betrayal anymore. It was about survival. And Noah, my brilliant, stubborn son, was doing everything he could to protect what little we had left. Okay, I said finally. What's your plan? He grinned again, that same mischievous grin that reminded me of Sarah. First, we're going to freeze the loan account. Then, we're going to make sure she can't spend another dime. And after that, we're going to confront her. It sounded insane. It was insane. But as I sat there, listening to Noah lay out his plan like some kind of child prodigy mastermind, I realized something. This wasn't just about getting back at Sarah. This was about teaching her that she couldn't just walk away from her family without consequences. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could come out of this mess stronger than before. All because my 10-year-old son refused to let us sink. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something in my gut told me to answer. Maybe it was intuition. Or maybe it was the faint hope that Sarah had finally grown a conscience. Either way, I picked up, bracing myself for whatever storm was coming. Jacob, it's me. Her voice was sharp, frantic. The cool, detached tone she'd used when she left was gone, replaced by something I'd never heard before. Fear. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the phone a little tighter. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice steady. To what do I owe the pleasure? Don't play games with me, she snapped. What did you do? Why are the police asking questions about me? And why is my account frozen? I can't access any of my money. I almost laughed. The irony of her panic was delicious. You're asking me what happened? I said, my tone dripping with mock innocence. I thought you had everything figured out, Sarah. You've got your boyfriend, your freedom, and my $20,000. Isn't that what you wanted? Jacob, this isn't funny, she hissed. David's furious. He says I've dragged him into a legal mess, and now his boss is questioning him about the loan. What did you do? I didn't do anything, I said, enjoying the rare moment of calm in the chaos she had created. But our son? He might have outsmarted you. There was a long pause, the kind that stretches so thin it's about to snap. "Noah," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "What does Noah have to do with this?" "Everything, Sarah," I said. "While you were off living your best life, Noah was cleaning up the mess you left behind. He tracked your movements, reported your fraudulent loan to the bank, and froze the account before you could spend another dime." "That's impossible," she said, her voice trembling. "He's just a kid." "No," I corrected her. "He's our kid, and he's 10 times smarter than you ever gave him credit for." Her voice broke, teetering between anger and desperation. "You have to fix this, Jacob. The police are going to think I committed fraud. Maybe because you did?" I said, unable to hide the sarcasm. "You took out a loan using false information, drained our savings, and left your family with nothing. What exactly did you think would happen?" She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing on the other end, shallow and shaky. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said finally. "It was just supposed to be a way to start over." I clenched my jaw, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "Start over? By leaving your son and me in ruins? Is that what starting over looks like to you?" "I didn't think," she began, but I cut her off. "No, you didn't," I said, my voice rising. "You didn't think about the damage you were doing, the mess you were leaving for Noah and me to clean up. You didn't think about anyone but yourself?" For a moment, there was silence. And then she said something I wasn't expecting. "I'm sorry." I froze. It wasn't the apology itself that caught me off guard. It was the way she said it. Quiet, genuine, vulnerable. For the first time since she left, I heard the Sarah I used to know, the one I thought I'd spend my life with. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Sarah," I said. "Sorry doesn't pay off the loan or undo the damage you've caused. If you really want to make things right, you'll turn yourself in and face the consequences." Her silence spoke volumes. I knew what she was thinking, that facing the consequences meant losing everything. Her freedom, her new life with David, maybe even her dignity. And she wasn't ready to let go of those things, no matter how much she claimed to regret what she'd done. "I can't," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Then I can't help you," I replied. "Jacob, please," she begged. "David's threatening to leave me. I have nothing without him." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you walked out the door," I said. "But don't worry. I'm sure the police will help you figure it out." Before she could respond, I hung up. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't just the anger or the frustration. It was the realization that I didn't recognize the person on the other end of the line anymore. Sarah wasn't the woman I married. She wasn't the mother Noah deserved. She was a stranger. "Dad?" Noah's voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to see him standing in the doorway, his arms crossed and a satisfied smirk on his face. She sounded scared. "She is," I said, forcing a weak smile. "You did good, Noah. You really did." He grinned, a mixture of pride and relief washing over his face. "So, what's next?" I sighed, the weight of the question settling on my shoulders. "We wait," I said, "and we make sure she can't hurt us again." Because if there's one thing I'd learned, it's that Sarah wasn't just running from her mistakes. She was running from herself. And no matter how far she went, the truth would always catch up to her. When the moment came to confront Sarah, I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe I thought she'd crumble under the weight of her guilt. Maybe I thought I'd feel some sort of satisfaction seeing her face the consequences of her actions. But what actually happened was something I could have never prepared for. It started with Noah. He was the one who suggested we confront her in person. "She needs to know she can't just walk away," he said, his voice steady in that unervingly mature way he had. I couldn't argue with him. She'd left us with nothing but chaos, and it was time she faced the mess she'd made. The GPS app gave us her exact location. A luxury lodge by the lake, the kind of place we'd once dreamed of visiting together as a family but could never afford. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah was living our fantasy, but it was built on lies and stolen money. Noah and I drove out there the next morning. The closer we got, the more my chest tightened. Part of me didn't want to do this. Part of me wanted to turn the car around, go home, and pretend none of this was happening. But then I looked at Noah, sitting beside me with that determined look on his face, and I knew I couldn't back down. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about teaching my son that we don't run from our problems, even when they seem insurmountable. When we arrived at the lodge, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting on the patio with David, sipping a cocktail and laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. My stomach churned. How could she look so carefree when she'd left nothing but destruction in her wake? Ready? Noah asked, his voice calm but firm. I nodded, though my hands were shaking as I got out of the car. Together, we walked up to her table. She saw us before we reached her, her smile freezing mid-laugh. For a moment, she just stared at us, her face pale, her eyes darting between me and Noah like she couldn't decide if we were real or just a figment of her imagination. Jacob, she said finally, her voice barely audible, what are you doing here? Taking back what's ours, I said, my voice colder than I expected. You didn't think you could just walk away, did you? David, who had been quietly watching the exchange, finally spoke up. Is this your ex? He asked, his tone more annoyed than concerned. Look, buddy, we're in the middle of something. Why don't you take your kid in? Don't, I said, cutting him off. My eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. This isn't about you. Not yet, anyway. Sarah's face turned red as she scrambled to regain control of the situation. Jacob, please, she said, her voice trembling. We don't need to do this here. Oh, I think we do, I replied, crossing my arms. Because you didn't just leave us with a broken family, Sarah. You left us with your debt. You drained our savings. And now you're sitting here, drinking cocktails like none of it matters. Dad, Noah said, his voice steady but sharp. Show her. I pulled out the stack of documents Noah and I had prepared, the loan paperwork, the empty savings account statements, the GPS logs showing her movements. I placed them on the table, one by one, watching as her expression shifted from defiance to panic. You're lying, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. I never meant for. Stop, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. You knew exactly what you were doing, Sarah. And now, you're going to face the consequences. David stood up, clearly uncomfortable with the turn of events. Look, I didn't sign up for this, he said, backing away from the table. I didn't know. Save it, I said, cutting him off again. You knew enough to run off with her. You're just as complicit as she is. Sarah's eyes widened as she realized David was about to abandon her. David, wait, she cried, reaching for his arm. Don't go. I'll fix this, I promise. But David was already walking away, muttering something about not wanting to get involved in family drama. And just like that, Sarah was alone. You can't do this to me, she said, turning back to me, her voice trembling. You can't take everything. You took everything first, Noah said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. You left us with nothing, Mom. Now it's your turn. For a moment, she just stared at him, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Regret? Fear? Whatever it wasn't enough to undo the damage she'd done. This is your chance to make it right, Sarah, I said, my voice softer now. Turn yourself in. Take responsibility for what you've done. Show Noah that you're better than this. She didn't respond. Instead, she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. It was the first time I'd seen her break since she left, and for a moment, I felt a pang of pity, but it wasn't enough to change my mind. Let's go, Noah, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. We've done what we came to do. As we walked away, I glanced back one last time. Sarah was still sitting there, alone at the table, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal. And for the first time since she left, I felt a sense of closure. After the confrontation, there was no going back, for Sarah, for me, or for Noah. That moment at the lodge had been the final nail in the coffin of whatever semblance of family we had left. Now it was time to clean up the wreckage she'd left behind. The first step was filing an official report with the police. I explained everything, the fraudulent loan, the drained savings account, and how she had abandoned us with a mountain of debt. Noah, ever the meticulous planner, had all the supporting evidence ready to hand over. The officers were impressed by how thorough it was, though I had to deflect a few questions about how a 10-year-old had gathered so much information. The officers assured me that the case was solid. Sarah had committed fraud when she falsified information for the loan, and with the bank involved, there was no avoiding the consequences. A warrant was issued for her arrest, and I was told the investigation would take its course. It was a bittersweet moment. On one hand, I felt relief knowing that justice was finally catching up with her. On the other, it hurt to know that Noah had to witness his mother's downfall at such a young age. But Noah, as always, seemed unfazed. "She made her choice, Dad," he said as we left the police station. "Now we just have to make ours." The next step was dealing with the loan. I contacted the bank and explained the situation, providing proof that Sarah had committed fraud. After what felt like an eternity of back and forth, they finally agreed to cancel the loan, pending the results of the investigation. The relief was almost overwhelming. The $20,000 no longer hung over our heads like a guillotine, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. With the loan sorted, I turned my attention to securing Noah's future. I met with a lawyer to ensure that Sarah's actions wouldn't jeopardize our stability any further. The lawyer helped me file for sole custody of Noah, citing Sarah's abandonment and financial recklessness. It was a straightforward case. Sarah hadn't just left us. She'd essentially forfeited her right to be a parent. The custody hearing came and went with little fanfare. Sarah didn't even show up. I was granted full custody, along with a court order requiring her to pay $500 a month in child support. I didn't expect her to actually pay, but the lawyer assured me that her wages, if she ever got a job, could be garnished to ensure compliance. As for the camper van, it was time to cut my losses. The vehicle had been sitting in the driveway since we retrieved it, a constant reminder of Sarah's betrayal. I decided to sell it, using the proceeds to rebuild our savings. It wasn't much, certainly not the $35,000 it had originally cost, but it was enough to give us a fresh start. Through it all, Noah remained my rock. He took on more responsibilities at home, helping with chores and errands without being asked. One evening, as we sat together folding laundry, he said something that stuck with me. "You know, Dad, I don't think Mom was happy," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Not with herself, not with us, not with anything. Maybe that's why she did what she did." I looked at him, amazed by his insight. "You're probably right, Noah," I said. "But her unhappiness doesn't excuse what she did. We all have to take responsibility for our choices." He nodded, his expression serious. "I'm glad you're my dad," he said after a moment. "You don't give up." His words hit me like a punch to the chest. All the doubt, all the guilt I'd been carrying about not protecting him from Sarah's actions seemed to lift in that instant. I realized that while I couldn't control what Sarah had done, I could control how we moved forward. And that's exactly what I intended to do. The last piece of the puzzle was finding a way to ensure Sarah couldn't disrupt our lives again. I worked with the lawyer to place restrictions on her ability to access Noah or our finances without court approval. It wasn't foolproof, but it gave me peace of mind knowing that she couldn't just waltz back in and undo the progress we'd made. By the time the dust settled, it felt like a lifetime had passed since Sarah walked out the door. But in reality, it had been just a few short months. In that time, Noah and I had gone from being victims of her betrayal to survivors of it. We had weathered the storm together, and though the scars were still fresh, they were a testament to our resilience. I wish I could say that Sarah learned her lesson, that she turned her life around and became the person I once believed she could be. But life isn't always tied up with a neat little bow. The last I heard, she was working odd jobs and struggling to stay afloat. Part of me felt sorry for her, but I knew better than to let that pity pull me back into her orbit. She'd made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. The storm had passed, but its aftermath lingered, leaving cracks in the foundation of the life Noah and I were rebuilding. Yet, for the first time in what felt like forever, we had hope. Hope that we could move forward, not as a broken family, but as a stronger one. It started with the little things. Mornings became calmer without Sarah's chaotic energy dominating the house. Noah, ever the problem solver, took it upon himself to organize our days. He made a color-coded schedule for chores, schoolwork, and downtime. Efficiency is key, Dad, he said one evening, holding up a chart that could have rivaled the work of any corporate planner. I couldn't help but laugh. You know you're 10, right? You're supposed to be worrying about video games, not chore schedules. Someone's gotta keep this place running, he replied with a smirk. It was moments like these that reminded me just how much he'd grown in the past few months. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was my partner, my teammate. Financially, things were stabilizing. Selling the camper van had given us a small cushion, and with the loan canceled, the pressure on my shoulders eased considerably. I picked up extra shifts at work when I could, determined to rebuild the savings Sarah had drained. It wasn't easy, but every dollar I saved felt like a small victory, a step toward a future where Noah and I didn't have to look over our shoulders. Noah, of course, was always finding ways to help. One afternoon, I came home to find him standing at the kitchen counter, a tray of cookies cooling beside him. "What's this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm starting a cookie business," he said matter-of-factly, handing me a flyer he'd printed at school. 50 cents a cookie. All proceeds go to the Jacob and Noah Recovery Fund. I burst out laughing, the kind of deep, cathartic laugh I hadn't felt in months. "You're something else, kid," I said, ruffling his hair. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments when the weight of what we'd been through hit me like a freight train. Nights when I'd lie awake, replaying Sarah's betrayal in my mind, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. And then there were the times I saw the sadness in Noah's eyes, the moments when he thought I wasn't looking. He missed her, even if he didn't say it outright. She was his mom, after all, and no amount of anger or disappointment could erase that bond. One night, as we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, he turned to me and asked, "Do you think she'll ever come back?" I paused, caught off guard by the question. "I don't know, buddy," I said honestly, "but if she does, it'll be on our terms. She'll have to prove that she's ready to be the mom you deserve." He nodded, his face thoughtful. "I don't think she will," he said quietly, "but that's okay. We're doing fine without her." Hearing him say that broke my heart a little, but it also filled me with pride. Noah had every right to be angry, every right to feel abandoned. Yet, he'd chosen to move forward, to focus on what we had instead of what we'd lost. As the weeks turned into months, life began to feel normal again, or at least, a new version of normal. We found joy in the small things. Cooking dinner together, playing board games on the weekends, or just sitting on the porch, watching the world go by. There were no grand gestures, no life-changing moments, just the quiet, steady work of rebuilding. One evening, as we were sitting at the table eating dinner, Noah looked up at me and said, "You know, Dad, I think we're going to be okay." I smiled, my chest swelling with pride. "Yeah, buddy," I said, "I think we are." But even as we moved forward, I couldn't shake the lessons we'd learned. Sarah's betrayal had left scars, but it had also taught us resilience. It had shown me the depth of Noah's strength, his unwavering loyalty, and his incredible ability to adapt. And it had reminded me of my own strength, the strength to protect, to persevere, and to build a life for my son, no matter the odds. Looking back now, I realized that Sarah's leaving wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where Noah and I could write our own rules, free from the chaos she brought into our lives. The road ahead wasn't perfect, and I knew there would be challenges. But as I watched Noah finish his dinner, already launching into a detailed plan for his next school project, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Because no matter what came next, I knew we'd face it together. And together, we could handle anything.